All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We're really excited to have you here. Today we want to talk about how we can bridge the gap between product and customer facing teams. My name is Himica. You know. Got it? Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. So one thing before I start our presentation is we want to keep this very informal and conversational. Please feel free to interrupt us, ask questions, comments at any time. This is not meant to be super formal. Like, this is an unconference and we'd like to keep it that way. So please ask your questions as they come up. So without further ado, my name is Himica. I'm a product manager. I've been in product for over 8 years, working at companies like Adyen, Coupa Software, and PayPal.
Hi, I'm Samip. I have worked in products and solutions for Adyen, Uber, and Boeing before.
And today, both of us are here because we've partnered together at our previous company, and we want to talk about how we've been able to successfully deliver product success working together. So first, we want to just kind of level set and talk about, like, what do we mean by product and customer facing? And obviously this is a product camp, so you probably know what product means, but really just kind of establish a baseline, right? So the product manager is primarily responsible for product vision and strategy. They conduct market research and competitive analysis. They're basically trying to understand what's going on out there and how can I make my product better and build that strategy. In order to do so, they're also working on prioritizing of new features, of new builds, technical initiatives. They're responsible for road mapping and the whole development process. So they're really making sure that what they're building is going to be successful and align with company goals and outcomes. And to do that, they also need to monitor product metrics and success. So there's a lot product managers do. We'll talk about customer facing roles right now and then talk about similarities.
Yeah, for the customer facing roles, since Himica and I both have worked in the B2B space, so this is what we have seen mostly in the B2B companies. Customer facing roles include sales, account manager, partner or solutions engineer. Partner engineer, in case if that's a technical product, or solutions engineer can be pre or post sales as well. And then the person who keeps the relationship alive with the businesses is account managers. So the goal for customer facing team is to make sure that the product is delivered to the customer, onboarding is done successfully, so the customer is happy, so that they can see that the customer is successful in the journey for the product. Second is making sure that the ongoing training and the support that is needed by the customer is being provided by the companies. And then gathering, analyzing data set, what customers are looking at, taking feedback from the customer, and also taking that into account whenever they can share it with the product person. The last point is customer relationship management. That is being taken care by account managers in most of these companies. Account managers are the one who talks to the customers as well as bring that feedback back to the company so that they can do product iteration. There are common similarities that Himica will discuss now.
Yeah, so some of the similarities include gathering customer feedback for product improvements, right? Like, if you're working with a customer, you're automatically collecting feedback. Even if you don't want it, they're going to tell you. You're going to be working on UX enhancements because, again, you're explaining to them how to use your interface, whether that's an API or an actual user interface. So they're going to give you feedback there. Training and documentation is a really important one because as a customer facing team, you are making your customers successful. So you have to give them the tools and the guides to do that. And product is also responsible for doing that. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. But at the end of the day, right, both of you are trying to focus on the customer's pain points and make sure your metrics are being successful, because for product, right, you want to make sure your product is used. But for customer teams, you want to make sure you can upsell, you have cross-sell opportunities. You want to make sure that as you're expanding, your customers are using more, coming back to you, because ultimately we all want more revenue for the company. That's the entire goal of us being employed. So yeah. So one thing I really want to talk about right now is a report from a 2024 State of Product Management report. So this report interviewed over 1,400 respondents about what is going on in the product management industry today. And what they found is that product strategy is the most valuable job out of everything we talked about for product managers to do. And when you think about it, a lot of the customer management, cross collaboration, cross functional teams, there are other folks at the company or other roles that can handle those kinds of conversations. But product strategy is the one and only thing that product managers have full control over, right? So this is like your kingdom, this is your empire, this is what you got to kill it and be really good at. And in order to do that well, we were looking at what drives product strategy at most companies. So on the next slide, we have a chart showing what influences development of product strategy. And I hear this chuckling because you all know it's true. Most of it is not coming from you. It's coming from those senior leadership people. So your CFO, your CEO, CPO, VPs, you name it, right? Like a lot of what I have seen and the industry also sees is product strategy is actually driven by senior leadership. And the second most important driver of product strategy seems to be customer feature requests, competition and market, and then feedback from sales and support. And what I think is really interesting about this is you want to put the customer first, you're a customer-centric PM, but when you have senior leadership come, it's very hard to say no. And if you go to the next slide, we're going to see how these drivers impact overall company outcomes and alignment with company values and mission of the company. So if you look at those drivers, the top four we saw in the previous slide, and then you look at how effective the effectiveness of product vision and strategy aligning with company goals based on those drivers of strategy, you can see that senior leadership is actually the lowest. So while your senior leadership may think they know what's best, you can see 1,400 PMs don't agree. And so I thought this was a really cool, interesting number chart, whatever, to put out there. And you can see that all of the other areas, sales and support, feedback, customer feature requests, competition, resulted in better alignment with company goals and values than just following senior leadership alone. So I think that says a lot. I think it says knowing your customer is most important. And we all know that as PMs, but it can be hard to justify when you have a leader coming to you. And we're trying to help you, arm you with tools, and basically say by partnering with these customer teams, you can also do that and keep the customer out. Is better.
All right, so it's very clear what we are about to talk today, how we can have product managers and customer facing teams work together so that we can bring much more value to the customers and also innovate our product. To not get into a cycle where product is just iterating like a single point or something, but we are making big improvement and bring more value to the customer. So we'll see how we have done this before or what we have collectively done before, and share some knowledge with you. So there is some gap in this industry right now. And what is this gap? So as a product manager, there is an executive push that Himica showed us the numbers there. And then there are enterprise clients, especially in the B2B industries. Enterprise client or top 5 clients just come over and they say, hey, we want this feature. As a product manager, you don't have any other option just to go ahead and build that feature. You can prioritize it, but they are, let's say, bringing 60% of the revenue. No other chance to like ignore the request. You have to build it. And then the third piece is technical projects take time. By technical projects here, I mean that not just working on a technical project that is coming from a product world, but more of like migration work. If a company has bought someone, then you have to do the upgrade or you have to work on bringing both technologies together. So there is always something related to, I don't want to call it tech date, but there is something about this debt that we have to fix it. Product managers have to look into this all the time. In regards to customer facing team, they have to focus on customer adoption. If one product or one feature is built, they just have to make sure it has enough customers that they can get so that they can increase the revenue. And second is manual work to address gap. I have seen this so many times. In fact, I've done this so many times that there is some operation work that I need to get done for an enterprise client. I need to do this because I cannot get this prioritized with the product person because they have other product priorities that is going on. So working like writing scripts or writing scripts as well as writing SQL queries to make sure that the goal gaps are filled. And working with many client sizes. Given that customer-facing teams work with enterprise client to startups to SMBs, there are just a variety of clients that they have to work with. And when the priorities come, what enterprise wants versus what startups want, the push is simpler. Just go with the enterprise. So the gap exists. We all know about this and how we have addressed this before successfully that we are going to share today. So customer-facing teams. This is our ideology that we think should be done. Is that customer-facing teams should be included from the ideation phase in the product design lifecycle. And any product talk will be incomplete without a product lifecycle photo here. So we'll talk in detail about this, but ideally, basically what we're saying here, there are 6 points here that we're trying to say in the B2B space, and customer facing teams should be included in each of these phases. If given the understanding or scaling or launching or building or strategizing, everywhere customer facing teams should be included. Does anyone have any examples or anything that they want to share so that it looks like we are not the only ones who have seen this problem?
Yeah, we're gonna.
Yeah, and I think your ideation piece actually works for this, how we build in Microsoft. Well, I can speak. Yeah, I'm just gonna repeat. We have this problem. I work at a big company and there's a lot of opinions and there's a lot of leadership pressure as well. But what I've seen personally working is that when we include our key stakeholders at the beginning of the process, they have an opportunity to speak up. They also feel included, which then helps us to get their support down the road, and just, essentially prioritize the thing that we suggest, right, are the most important because they've been included in each and every, of course, not to the point where like they are on every meeting, right, but just to feel like they are part of
People
that.
more excited.
Yeah,
Exactly. The adoption
I feel like
later
the
on. They're
excitement is a
invested.
good word. Is the good word. They just feel like, wow, this is coming together, and I see that pieces of the puzzle.
Thank
Thank
you.
Anyone else have anything else to add?
So another example, I was working on an e-commerce app that was global and there were different regulations in different countries. And at the beginning, we did not have any of the local customer facing teams involved, and we got ready to ship the app and learned that we were non-compliant with a bunch of regulations, and it delayed global rollout for months because we had to go back and add in code that was going to put in the right regulations or the right disclaimers. So it was not ideal.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a great example.
Working at a fintech, we work with a lot of regulation. Anyone else?
All right.
All right, so we want to make this interactive and we're actually going to make you do some work today. So you thought it was your day off. It's not. We're going to do a workshop, and I'll tell you why we're doing this specific example in a second, but let's just kind of switch into the mindset of you're a PM, which you all are, and you now work at DoorDash at the reporting team, on the reporting team, on a new reporting feature. Basically, you don't have any reporting functionality and you've been hired to like fix all these problems for them. Chipotle is a top 10 client, as we all know, and they want to expand their partnership with DoorDash because everyone seems to be delivering more and more food these days. And they want to do so, but they need to understand their financial performance on DoorDash today before choosing, let's say, DoorDash versus Uber Eats versus Grubhub to go with. And in order to do that, they really need a lot more reporting data from you, which you don't have, hence you've been hired. And Chipotle's finance team wants to know sales and order performance. So things like how many bowls are they selling versus burritos versus tacos? What's getting most sold in Chicago versus New York versus California? All of this kind of data, like sales over month, sales over quarter, different currencies if they're in different countries. They want to know all this stuff, and you don't have a way to provide this to them.
All right. Does anyone have any questions related to this?
We're going to talk about why we chose this example now, Samip.
All right. So I have done this previously. A customer enterprise merchant asked me in my previous role at Uber, and they asked me, like, can you give us any information about, or like they have their data as well, but they were asking me, can you give us any information about how's our technical APIs performing? How's our stores performing? Which stores has more orders and all? Like, okay, we'll figure it out. And then our senior leadership was also asking about this. Since I have a technical background, I can write SQL queries and like do all those things, build up a beautiful dashboard for them, sharing that manually every single week with the senior leadership of both the enterprise merchant as well as at Uber leadership as well, so that all of them can see what the metrics are. I'll share the outcome of that. How did we resolve that manual work later on? But that's how I started. That was a request coming in because they wanted to see it. It's not that they don't have data; they can see their own data, but they also wanted to see what we are seeing as a trend, and then as broader trend, what they can take advantage.
So Samip is here running SQL queries, taking screenshots, and sending them to the client.
Every week.
Just to drive home the point. Every week.
Awesome.
We can do some automation there, but yeah.
Sounds like a great use
I
of
know.
time.
All right.
So, okay, so let's go a little bit more into the context, right? Chipotle's already integrated via an API integration into DoorDash's restaurant platform. So this means they've already connected everything. They can easily add new stores. They can take orders. They can take an order from DoorDash, put it into their order management system, display it to an employee at a physical brick and mortar store, and get the whole sales and everything done. They've automated the payment processing. They've automated the sales side. But what they have not automated is reporting. And the challenge is there's no way for Chipotle to get consolidated reporting data. They have to create a support ticket. So like we talked about, DoorDash has to, or Chipotle has to come to DoorDash, create a support ticket with their account manager saying, I want to know my total sales over the last month from what you've seen, and divide that by city or something like this. And they have to create a support ticket. Someone like Samip has to write the query. Someone else with support live access has to run the query, and then they have to send it back as screenshots or copy pasted files. It's really inefficient. And so we want to brainstorm with you, how could you solve this example? Like as a PM, what are the steps you would take? How would you work on it? Go.
To jump in, I for some reason I like immediately go, oh yeah.
Test. All right. So just to, I guess, generate some ideas or start the conversation, I immediately jump to ideas. And I think there's probably a bit more scaffolding around the decision making that I'd want to make sure gets built out. But just like reading the problem description, hearing the context, I think like generating email digests that could go out, augmenting the API, maybe the different teams on hand and their capacities cause us to lean one way or the other. But that's where my head starts to go.
Good thought. We'll come back to that. I'm gonna go here.
Sorry. The same question.
So the first thing that I thought of here was how we get the resources, and in order to show the need for the resources, showing the problem statement. I'm sure Chipotle is not the only one looking for this type of data. So going through support tickets and looking to see like how many of these types of requests, then being able to build that case in order to be able to execute on this, like, and utilize those resources.
I might question too, like, could Chipotle just want access through an API to create their own report, or do we have to create them and then give them to them?
I was a business analyst, so I kind of take a step back to understand, why does Chipotle even need these reports? What are they going to do with it? And understand, what type of reports do they want customized? Do they want ad hoc? Do they want it on a weekly basis? And what exact data do they need? That would sort of drive, which reports do we really need to build first? So putting that customer hat on and understanding the why first before going into the solutioning. So.
I think to build off of that too, not just looking at what data points would be important to them too, but also measuring it against what kind of promos is DoorDash running, and does that improve the sales also with Chipotle, and therefore trying to not only increase like the relationship there and profits there, but then like was said earlier, other companies would likely be interested in this as well as another marketing to boost DoorDash above like Uber Eats and whatnot.
All right.
There are a few more points here.
Okay. Yeah. This is great.
Also to the point of this being valuable for other customers, after you're pulling the tickets of like how many people have requested this at different enterprises, I feel like if you're building an enterprise solution, you should look for the data points that everybody is asking for so that you consider every client that might be using this dashboard. And then obviously you have to go to your technical teams if you're making this widely available, like what's the effort?
Those are great. One more, and then we'll have to move on.
So one of the thoughts that came to mind, certainly Chipotle can build automation, build reports and all of that. But one of the thoughts that came to mind is if Chipotle is top 10 customer of DoorDash, then why not just go to DoorDash and say, build it for us?
Yeah. I think this is actually a really good point because the decision maker at Chipotle does have that kind of influence at DoorDash. And again, senior leadership at DoorDash is going to push you to build this because Chipotle is just too big to lose, right? So I think these are all valid points, and I want you to save those thoughts because we're going to come back to each of those a little bit later.
Yeah. Just to add another point there, I've seen that enterprise merchants, like there was one point, find a pattern between enterprise merchant. If one is asking, then maybe other enterprise merchants are also asking about this. What I have seen personally is that the solutioning or what they're asking is somewhat different. So either make that API that is highly customizable or like make something that is highly customizable that can address both of those, which technically makes sense to do it, but then it will be a two different code base or two different files that we have to think about. So great thought. I've seen that not working before. So ideally, I would love that to work, but it didn't work. All right. Then all the good points were there, but I'll summarize it to 2 points here, which is API-based solution and dashboard-based solution. In the end, after taking all the feedback or all the question back and forth communication with Chipotle versus senior leadership versus the product team and the customer-facing team, I think eventually these two will be the top priorities for the as like the solution point of view. Whether should we build an API-based solution because Chipotle has already done API integration. It will be easier for them to integrate new API. Just to clarify here, API is mostly about one application talking to another application, like Chipotle can talk to a DoorDash application, right? Where if DoorDash decides to build an API-based solution, that means Chipotle's finance team or engineering team can use that data, build their own dashboard or whatever they want to do with that, and run that query over time, whatever, weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever they want to do. They can do that and use that information and run their queries. But with dashboard solution, let's say if DoorDash decides to build a dashboard solution, it will not be that customizable. It will be mostly about here are the top five metrics that we think are going to be important for you. Because DoorDash will try to push that matrix to the enterprise merchants. Maybe they will make it some little bit customizable, but not a lot. The matrix will be defined. The analytics that they're looking for will be defined there, predefined. Let's look into this solution, the pros and cons here. For API-based solution, the pros is clear that any information that finance team needs, they can customize it. They can get their information from the API-based solution. And then Chipotle can build their own interface. So everything stores in-house for Chipotle. They don't have to go somewhere else and look at other dashboard or other things. They can just have everything in-house within their own system. But the cons, for DoorDash point of view, it takes longer to build. DoorDash has to think about security. They have to think about API latency. They also have to think about documentation, training, demos if they want to build. Then they also have to think about release management. APIs have to take care of version controlling. API also has to take care of usage. What about during Black Friday event versus like holiday events versus non-holiday peak days? How do we maintain that? So like all those resources will be included, and that will be not just for a project to build the reporting, but it will be a longer term investment from DoorDash. So there are both pros and cons for this type of solution. I want to see if anyone has done anything related to API-based solution, and have you guys seen anything like this and want to share? Okay, there's one person who wants to share.
Let me bring the mic.
Thanks.
Okay, so I work for well, I would probably consider a relatively small company. We have a very niche product. We have a dashboard kind of interface. We also have APIs. I'll say that from, it does take longer, but what's happened instead of building APIs from the get-go is that our product has become like a mishmash because everyone wants to tweak it and wants their own version, and we're currently rewriting everything and it's become a complete mess because that person uses it this way and this person uses it that way. So we are pushing to, drive more towards APIs, even though it does take a little bit more on the development side, because in the end, it ends up, satisfying the customer, especially since a lot of them are using, BI tools, and that's where they want that to go.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
I have a very similar example, like a real world. We tried both the API and the dashboard solution. With the API, it worked pretty well initially, but over the time, maintenance of the API is how that API is getting consumed, breakage with the UI. We ran into those issues time and again. It also depends on the client. If the client is like tech worse, like I think like the API solutions worked very well, but for clients who are like, okay, we'll figure it out, like the dashboard solution worked because that's something they are getting out of the box. They don't have to maintain it. But that was my experience, like working through this problem for years.
Exactly similar experience.
We have one more here.
I think on the same vein of that is, while the API solution may be great, it's also putting the onus on Chipotle to have to build that out, and maybe a little bit less consumer friendly for folks who don't have those resources available or don't have that on the roadmap, and they want to make those financial decisions right away and then aren't able to do that until they're doing the development work.
That's a great point as well. And we need to think about the users. End users of this problem is financial users. So we need to think about them and how they can leverage the solution, or that is easier for them.
And one thing I'm just going to say is initially we talked about looking at other support tickets, so similar use cases, other clients who might even have this problem. Like, is this a problem worth solving, right? It's important to think about who are those other clients, who are those other customers that would want something like this, and does this kind of solution solve for their needs?
Yeah, I think for the big companies like DoorDash, it's important, of course, the bigger clients they have, but also the scalability of the products, right? When they think, I think to add on to what you said before, assessing the scalability of those features or the new products. So it's not just we building, this customized solution for Chipotle or any other big clients because they ask us to do so.
A great point.
Great segue to the next slide here, which is dashboard solution. Simple, fast enough, easily scalable, and it gets the job done for the financial team that they want to see. No extra work, no integration required, no extra resources required on the Chipotle side. If you want to solve customers' problem that they want to see sales metric, they don't have to wait for 1 year for a product to be built or 6 months for a product to be built. They just go log in, and 3 months the product is built, just go ahead and start it. With API-based solution, I think there were two sides. There were two builds that has to happen. One on the DoorDash side, and then second build has to happen on the Chipotle side. So that increases the cycle of product. But on the dashboard, just one team has to build it, and then the second one takes advantage of it. Great revenue option. Second cons here, predefined matrix that might not satisfy all the merchants, but it will satisfy majority of the customers there because they are looking for the same information. What is the highest store performing store, or which store has, or what's the highest order that we are receiving? What are the most popular items? And then the second or the two other cons, there will be custom queries will not be possible. They will not be able to write their own query that they want to see. And the third option will be data export. So this is again like going towards a feature side, but data export from a dashboard will not be possible. But from API, they can just save that information and build their own database solution out of that.
Any thoughts here?
Something related to the predefined metrics not satisfying all of the client needs. You can iterate on dashboards, and if there's a request coming in from the markets, like I feel like you could prioritize the need and improve upon your first like if you release a dashboard that satisfies your biggest client and then there's asks from other clients to improve on it, you definitely could do that.
Yeah.
Of course.
I think for the dashboard solution, there'd be an opportunity to for DoorDash to kind of step back from Chipotle and think about all of the smaller companies that use DoorDash solely for their delivery purposes. And if there's a market to build this product out that yes is going to check a box for Chipotle, but it's going to introduce an entire new revenue stream for DoorDash for all these other companies that were never on the table in the initial discussions.
Yep. Great point. I think we have more slides on that further.
Yeah.
Just a question about the dashboard solution, and I'm curious, like either for your or the rest of the group's thoughts on whether a potential con to it would be like operational management of the dashboard and ownership and augmentation of it, because my experience is it tends to float out of like product and engineering and over to some like accounting team or something like that that may like iterate on their own, and then you lose control of what's being offered.
There will be an operational support required for that. I'm sure once a dashboard, let's say, has been launched and multiple customers are using it, they will reach out for more questions like, what does metric mean? Or what does this number represent? Why am I looking at this number? Why my data say something else? I'm sure there will be questions like that. And somehow someone has to build a knowledge base or a support system that can be answered. Yes, that can be a con as well. That requires more operational support.
Yeah.
I think there is a desire from some enterprise-wide companies to have ownership over their solutions that they're offering for clients though, and like not to like just hand something off and say like, go do whatever you want with it. So like it's a double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah, and I think the point we're trying to drive is like there's no right or wrong like here. Like you can definitely do a dashboard, you can also do an API solution. Both can be right. It's just a matter of prioritizing and figuring out what's better for you and your custom use case, right? So like we're just trying to highlight differences in approaches and what's good or bad. And we'll talk about this on the next slide, but how could you have approached this better as a product manager? So great. So how could you have done that better as a PM, right? I think one thing that's important to say is if you, the point we're trying to drive home is you need to work with customer facing teams. And if you do that, a lot of the insights that you guys have already mentioned in this room that I said, keep in the back of your mind are going to come up. So for example, someone mentioned that Chipotle is so big that they can just ask for whatever they want and like throw their weight around, which is true and has happened to me and other, I'm sure all of you at many points. So you may not have an option because they're just so like gung-ho on I want this and I need it this way, and you don't have any other choice. Someone else mentioned that other clients, right? Like other clients maybe can't afford a new API integration. It's expensive, it takes resources, it takes time. It can also have professional services costs if you're kind of in that kind of engagement model. So there's a lot of negatives to it that your customer facing teams are going to be able to tell you. Another thing to note is that Chipotle will have to build their own interface. So like their finance team can't just like use an API, right? An engineer at Chipotle will have to take that data, plug into their interface, whether they build their own dashboard or their own database, whatever it is, and then make that, expose that in a consumable way for the finance team. So that's additional internal work for Chipotle to have to do. Now, maybe they want it, maybe they ask us to do it, but who knows, right? And the last point that I want to highlight is finance users are not the primary customers of DoorDash, right? Like while we are the reporting team, we have to keep in mind like how much work is too much and how much work makes sense. Because our primary customers are restaurants. Chipotle is one of thousands, if not tens of thousands. They are a top 10, but we need to keep in mind that there's so much else that the company needs to do. Where does this fall among all of the other priorities? Any thoughts here?
Thanks. Yeah, I think these are all very good points. What I'll add here is we should start like analyzing the user personas first. Like for example, providing raw data to Chipotle, is that something good? Are they going to be able to understand it? Like I think we should be very careful. I mean, when I'm sharing data with my customers, I have to make sure I'm conveying a message as well. What does that mean? Is raw data going to help them? They could misinterpret the information and think it's bad while it's actually good. So that will give us control over that message as well with the dashboard.
Had more time in this workshop to go through user journeys, ideate, like talk about these things, but I think it's a very good point. Yeah. Any other?
I think too, it's always important to understand DoorDash as a company and what they're trying to achieve in a few years. Is it like growing the top 10 Chipotle's or growing like the smaller ones out there? Because then like we can asking questions about if we create the dashboard and have more of that white glove treatment, like what does that mean and how much effort do we want to put into it?
That's a great point. For the purposes of time, I'm going to move on. I just realized our time check. Now to kind of go on the other side of this, on the dashboard solution, right? If we build this kind of solution, it's not going to be customizable by enterprise clients with very specific, unique requests. But does that mean that 80% of our clients are going to get a lot of value out of it? It's a really interesting thing to consider. DoorDash will have to put in a lot of work to maintain and add some queries, which is doable, and maybe it can be made easy, but it still is work. And someone has to ultimately, I think you made a point that someone else might have to own this. And so who is that team? Are they going to be willing to own it? Is it going to cause difficulty? And then lastly, this will require additional role and access management. So like the finance users, they're a new type of user. They're not the restaurant owner or like the employee. So you're going to have to think about permissioning and user profiles, and also what kind of data they have to see and manage security risks, because you now have a new type of user logging into your interface. Any thoughts here? I feel like we've talked about this now. So.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to the last slide that I was talking about, coming to a consensus here, product lifecycle states. So if we start with the understanding, the first thing is collect feedback from the customer facing team during the product lifecycle state, and during the ideation state, get that feedback, understanding what is the customer saying, not just the enterprise merchant, because customer facing teams have a variety of customers, enterprise to startups. So get all of those information there. Then ideating state. This is what I've seen very successfully done at Uber before, is validating the PRDs. So make sure that the PRDs are being validated and reviewed by all the stakeholders involved. It can be any team from customer facing team. So everyone has access, let's say, to Google Docs. They can add comment. And whenever a product person is presenting something, they can go ahead and say that, okay, this is what my customer wants across all the teams. And then we can go ahead and build that feature that will be used by multiple customers at that point of time. Then when product person is actually going and strategizing it, as a product lead, we can go ahead and ensure that that product or whatever we are building is going to go stand out to the customers, and we can sell it to the right customers there. After that, go ahead and build it. Like as a product person, we can go ahead, build that, work with our partner or solutions engineer, test it out, write documentation, build demos, so that we can go ahead and sell that product to the right customers. During this selling phase, one thing that I've seen at Ardian right now is also like the product manager joining the sales call, either pre-sales call or post-sales call, after the integration has been done or whatever that they're working with product, they join the calls. That actually helps product to just sit and listen, get the first-hand customer experience. Because we see when company grows bigger and bigger, product person are not in touch with their customers. So how can we solve that? And then the last piece is the scaling point. If we are building this product for the big SMBs, or if you're building this for the enterprise merchants, like where are we doing this? And take that feedback from the customers that we are selling it to, and take that to the next design iteration. So overall, this is how product and customer facing teams during the entire product lifecycle can connect together. And I want to share some of the tips and tricks that we have learned from our experiences so far.
Yeah. So kind of building on what Samip mentioned, right? It's like having a gut check with those people at every checkpoint you can think of is the best way. So basically step in step, like work together. But there are other ways you can actually make this happen. So one thing I want to talk about is a customer advisory board. It's a very like enterprise software kind of a topic, but at Coupa, which was enterprise software, we used to do this twice a year in person. We would actually fly out clients to Vegas, put them into a conference room, and for 2 hours just discuss like, what do you think of the product? It was a very like exclusive invite only thing. And really we would get a ton of feedback on what they thought of the product, what they wanted us to build. And we actually turned the tables on them. We asked our customers to be product managers, and we told them that here are all the requests that we want, basically all the requests we had seen from them. How would you prioritize this? And we were like, why don't you deal with our problems and tell us how you would solve them? And it turned out to be really great because it forced them to see things from a different perspective, and it forced them to say, hey, like, I understand now my ask is not as important as all of these other things you're building, or I still want my ask to be prioritized, but I understand why it's taken so long. And I think went a long way towards building empathy between both parties, as well as like you as a PM understanding what they really want. So if you can do this, I mean, I know it's difficult in person, but if you can do this even virtually, I think there's a lot of value.
For the second point, this I've seen at Uber and Adyen, both is the company-wide feature request. So when a product goes global, launching ahead of US and other countries, there are a lot of operation folks or the customer-facing teams or anyone from the company will start asking questions. Hey, can you build this? What is this? What bug? So having a company-wide feature request board that anyone can actually raise any request. It can be bug, it can be investigation, it can be feature request. And then product person goes and vote on it. And product person goes, oh, this has got the highest vote across all the regions. We should prioritize it. That can go into the prioritization matrix rather than just looking at one single point there.
Having customer teams be a part of your like documentation. So the thing I found is they're going to write their own documentation no matter what you do. So you may as well work together so you're not both duplicating work, and it saves you some work, right? So just work with your teams to help write that documentation, because at the end of the day, they're going to write their own customer guides. They're going to do all this work. And there's a lot you can both benefit by doing it together. So if you can have them be a reviewer, comment them in, have them approve something before releasing it, I think it adds a lot of value.
Fourth point here, have a champion from a customer team as a subject matter expertise. As product grow, we know that there are a lot of different product person, product leads, as well as like director of products. But then how do we give more benefits to the product managers who can actually take decisions, like strategy making decisions in their own hands? So if they are doing that, we also need to collaborate with the customer facing team. So if someone from the customer facing team, either from sales or solutions engineer or from account manager, can be the champion or can be the subject matter expertise of that product, they can spread that news or any new features that are coming out to their team, as well as take the feedback globally, share it with the product. So building the two-way communication is a very important piece here.
And then the last thing, we already talked about this, but just really build on those multiple checkpoints. You know, make sure on Jira you have people signing off, literally on Jira saying, I approve this, or I think this is a good feature, because you also don't want the opposite where at the end of a release, your customer teams are like, no, I don't want this, or this is not going to work. So build those in, build like formal processes, Jira checkpoints, or PRD reviewers, or whatever it is, so that this becomes something that your company just does without thinking, and it just really helps. So that's all we have for today. I want to make sure we leave enough time for questions. We also want you guys to share your journeys, like how have you approached this? What are some things you've seen? And how do you guys design products and work with these customer teams? Samip and I will be here all day, so you can also find us after this time ends if you want to talk more. But we really want to hear from you, like what do you guys do today? And any thoughts, comments?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How do you find the middle ground between having no feedback from customer facing teams, like not include them in your processes, and having too many people, too many opinions?
Yeah.
How, because this is where I feel like we have that challenge. We just have too many subject matters who are fighting for their opinion being included.
So, okay. So my tactic for all these difficult things is literally put them in a room and say, you guys are all giving me different feedback points, and I cannot move forward on a decision until we all decide and we're not all leaving this room until we all decide what we're doing next. So here are all of the things, each of like literally call them out. You asked me to do this, you asked me to do this. Can we please think of a solution that satisfies both of these? Or I need to move forward, and I won't move forward until we all decide. And it's a little bit forceful, but I found it worked. Sorry.
I have used that same method usually with like the CEO and the VP, but from like the customer success teams and support team, we actually try to, we have their own feedback place for our customers and internal, and everyone knows you need to go there. You can see what everyone has in there. You can upvote, you can do all that. And then we have a monthly process where we actually have a meeting with our customer success team just about feedback. So that's the time when they can actually, you know, bring those things up. And so it's a more structured way, but the CEO or VP doesn't join, and that's when we have to have those conversations.
Yeah, I think this goes back to if you can build it into your process at your company, I think it helps mitigate these kinds of issues. But if you can't, it's just put people in a room. It always works.
We use the voting mechanism.
Yeah, that's another good.
It's not like the best strategy, you know, decision-making process, but it works.
Yeah, I want to share my company actually did have the company-wide idea board where everyone can like chime in and upvote and everything. One of the challenge, and I don't know whether anyone here resonates with this, is a lot of people like upvote things but they don't know how much effort it would take, you know, for certain things. They will be like, oh, this one has like 30 votes. When will we get done? Like, what's that expectation setting? Didn't really work well for us. And then over time, I think people get discouraged and kind of you know, break the trust a little bit. And that's when we actually shut down the whole like user board. And what we transform into something that actually worked quite well is like power users. So, you know, we have people who actually the leadership recommended and they are the subject experts and they kind of represent the voice. So we don't have to go towards like the whole team, but for ideas that we prioritize and we have like a rough estimate, because prioritization ultimately comes down to the impact and the efforts, right? So we kind of direct the conversations a little bit, and those power users help us validate that. And then they also have this like monthly power user like rotating session, and a lot of people actually, you know, volunteer to sign up for such a program. So it kind of mitigate a little bit of the trust and votes and not knowing what things can get done.
Yeah, that's a great success story. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, thanks. I think we are out of time.
Yeah.
Officially.
I do want to share one more point. What Samip was doing there, manually sending every week. So I actually had got a chance to work with the senior product manager there and build a product out, a dashboard solution for not just for that client, but they will be sharing high level metrics with them. And when they looked at analytics, they're like, hey, this is actually very useful. We reiterated with top 3 merchants over there. And then we launched it for everyone. And then we started looking at everyone who is using the API usage, and they were already seeing benefits. Oh, we don't have to reach out to the support to ask them, hey, why is my API breaking? They can just go to the dashboard and find more information there. So that actually helped us gaining, like losing the support tickets and getting much more visibility into the matrix. So yeah, that actually worked.
So it is a success story. He didn't have to do this every week anymore. And we hope you guys don't have to deal with manual support tickets every week and you get to automate them. Thank you so much for coming. We really enjoyed this. We will be here. Thank you guys. We will be here for the next few minutes and then we'll be outside this room and also all day here. So you can come find us. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Networking snacks on both floors and the lunch begins at 11:40.
Yeah.
I brought my own snackers.
Yeah, we should definitely have. Photograph
The genuine talk shot. It's great. Beach.
I didn't suppose we're using it for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Networking.
For users, I don't think that's a.
Yeah.